The sound of muffled voices and the soft hum of a heart monitor were the only things keeping me tethered to reality that night. I was lying in the hospital bed, my body weak and frail, barely able to lift a finger. But my ears, oh, they worked just fine. Through the crack of the slightly open door, I heard my son Ethan whispering, his tone low, yet filled with something dark. "Are you sure she won't suspect anything?" he asked nervously. The other voice belonged to Mr. Bradley, my lawyer of over 20 years. His voice was smooth, almost rehearsed. "Relax, Ethan. She's barely conscious. Once she signs this revised will, everything transfers to you immediately. No one will question it. We just need her signature, and your inheritance is set." My chest tightened, not from illness, but from rage. They were talking about me, about my money, about the life I had built with my late husband's hard work and my own sacrifices. And here they were, plotting to rob me while I was still breathing. I wanted to scream, to tear the 4 out of my arm and storm out there, but my voice was weak. My body trembled, powerless. I had trusted both of them, my only son, my flesh and blood, and the man who had handled every legal matter for decades. They thought I was as good as dead. I pressed my eyes shut as I heard papers rustling. Bradley's voice grew sharper. "When she wakes, you'll guide her hand. She doesn't need to know what she's signing. By the time anyone finds out, it'll be too late." My hands twitched under the blanket. I might have been weak, but my mind was still sharp. They didn't know that. They also didn't know about the plan I had put in place years ago, a backup for betrayal. I stayed perfectly still as they entered my room. Ethan leaned close, smelling faintly of cologne and greed. "Mom, you just need to sign this. It's for the hospital bills," he said, his voice dripping with fake concern. I stared at him, my lips barely parting. "Hospital bills?" I croaked, feigning confusion. "Yes, Mom, just sign. You trust me, don't you?" he urged, placing the pen in my trembling hand. I looked at him through half-closed eyes, masking my anger. My hand hovered over the paper. I signed it, my signature messy and shaky. To them, it was a victory. To me, it was only the beginning of their downfall. Because what they didn't know was this: what they had me sign wasn't what they thought it was. My lawyer had been replaced. Mr. Bradley wasn't the real Bradley. And the will they thought they were forging? It was already voided by a clause I had hidden years ago. I smiled faintly as Ethan kissed my forehead, thinking he had won. The next morning, I called someone they never expected. And that's when everything began to unravel. I bet you're wondering how a frail 85-year-old woman like me could outsmart a snake in a suit and her own son. Let me take you back to where this all began, long before that night in the hospital, long before I pretended to sign those papers. My name is Margaret Holloway, a retired literature professor who spent her life reading stories about betrayal, love, and justice. Life taught me early that fiction wasn't so different from reality. My husband, Richard, and I built a modest fortune over 50 years together. He was a businessman, careful with every dollar, while I was the saver who turned those dollars into investments that grew quietly in the background. When Richard died, everything became mine: our house in Vermont, our retirement accounts, even the small publishing company he left behind. I thought Ethan, our only child, would honor his father's legacy. For a while, he did. But money changes people. I first noticed it when he asked for a small loan to invest in some tech startup. Then came the calls for help with debts, the sudden luxurious trips with his new girlfriend, and the cold tone in his voice when I refused to sign over parts of the estate to him. Still, I never thought he'd stoop this low. My lawyer, well, the real Mr. Bradley, was a close friend of Richard's. Years ago, he and I added an extra clause to my will. If anyone tried to forge, alter, or manipulate the document, not only would their claim be invalid, but the entire estate would be transferred to a trust fund under someone else's name, my granddaughter's. Here's the twist. Ethan didn't know I had changed lawyers 2 years ago. The real Mr. Bradley retired and recommended a sharp, younger attorney named Ms. Claire Preston. She was quiet, clever, and trustworthy, exactly the kind of person Ethan would underestimate. So when I heard Ethan and the so-called Bradley plotting, I knew they had no idea that Claire had already set a trap in the legal documents. Back in the hospital, I played the part of a confused, dying woman perfectly. It wasn't hard. The illness was real enough. But my mind was planning every move. The day after they got my shaky signature, I called Claire. My voice trembled as I spoke into the phone. Claire, it's happening. They're doing exactly what we feared. There was a pause on the other end, then her calm voice replied, Mrs. Holloway, don't worry. I've been expecting this. Everything is in motion. Do not confront them yet. Let them think they're winning. That day, I began to reflect on my life, on how my love for Ethan had blinded me to his greed. The memories of his childhood flashed in my mind, his laughter when he learned to ride his bike, his tears when Richard scolded him for lying. Where did that little boy go? I asked myself over and over, was I a bad mother? Did I spoil him too much? Or not enough? I spent the next few days pretending to be weaker than I was. Ethan visited me daily, always with that fake smile. He thought he had fooled me. He brought flowers, he held my hand, but I could see the calculation in his eyes. The fake Bradley was always nearby, checking papers, whispering in corners. One afternoon, as I drifted between sleep and wakefulness, I overheard something that made my blood run cold. Ethan chuckled softly. Once she's gone, I'll sell the house first. That old place is worth millions now. Then we'll liquidate everything else. Bradley, you'll get your cut. Bradley replied, Don't worry. No one will know. By the time the real documents surface, it'll be too late. Everything will already be in your name. But oh, they were so wrong. The day I left the hospital, Claire picked me up herself. She was disguised in plain clothes, just another visitor. Ethan thought he had more time, but we were already 3 steps ahead. By the time he and his fake lawyer celebrated their victory, they didn't know I had already signed a new set of documents, ones that would expose them the moment they tried to use their forged will. I smiled to myself, even as the cold Vermont wind hit my face outside the hospital doors. This wasn't over. It was just getting started. And then came the moment that flipped their world upside down. Because the first letter from my new attorney's office arrived at Ethan's door the next morning. Inside, it wasn't what he expected. It was a legal notice and a warning. Ethan called me that evening, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and confusion. Mom, he said sharply, skipping any greeting, what is this letter? It says there's been a legal hold placed on the estate. What's going on? I smiled, though he couldn't see it. Oh, Ethan, maybe you should ask your lawyer, I said, letting my tone drip with a sweetness that I knew would irritate him. I'm sure Mr. Bradley can explain it to you. There was a long pause. I imagined him clenching his jaw, pacing around whatever fancy apartment he was staying in. Don't play games with me, he finally hissed. We both know what you signed. Yes, I replied calmly. We both know exactly what I signed. He hung up without another word. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was quiet, but my mind raced. 4 years, I had let Ethan manipulate me with his charm. He was my son, my only child, and I wanted to believe he cared. But now, the mask was off. He had chosen greed over blood. Claire called me the next morning. Mrs. Holloway, she said, we've confirmed the forged document. They submitted it to the registry yesterday. Don't worry, our trap worked. The moment they tried to file it, the system flagged it as fraudulent. I felt a surge of pride mixed with sadness. Good, I said softly. Let them squirm a little. Claire explained the next steps. A formal investigation would begin, and both Ethan and the fake Bradley would be summoned to court. But she warned me, they won't give up easily. Expect them to fight back. She was right. Later that week, Ethan showed up at my door unannounced. He was furious, his cheeks flushed, his eyes wild. "How could you do this to me?" he shouted as soon as I opened the door. I leaned on my cane, keeping my voice steady. "Do what, Ethan? Protect what your father and I worked our whole lives for? Keep you from stealing it while I'm still alive?" His face twisted. "I'm your son. Everything you have should come to me. Should it?" I asked quietly, staring straight into his eyes. "Even if you have to trick me to get it?" For a brief moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Maybe guilt, maybe just frustration. He turned away and muttered, "You'll regret this." Then he stormed off, slamming the door behind him. I sank into my chair, my heart pounding. Regret? No. If anyone was going to regret something, it would be him. 2 days later, a letter arrived at my house, an unsigned threat. "Drop the investigation, or you'll lose more than just your money." I knew it was from Ethan. The handwriting was messy, but the tone— oh, I recognized my son's anger anywhere. I forwarded the letter to Claire immediately. "Keep this safe," I told her. "It might be useful later." As the legal proceedings began, I watched from the shadows. Ethan and his fake lawyer were scrambling, desperately trying to cover their tracks. They claimed the forged will was legitimate, that I had been confused when I signed the new documents. But what they didn't know was that every conversation they'd had about the forgery, every whisper, every plan, had been recorded. Yes, recorded. You see, I had a friend, an old student of mine, who worked in tech. Before my hospitalization, he had installed a discreet recording device in my hospital room, just in case. The evidence was damning. I remember sitting in the courtroom, my frail hands resting on my lap, as Claire played the audio. Ethan's voice, cold and calculating, filled the room. "Just guide her hand. She doesn't need to know what she's signing." The judge's face hardened. The audience gasped. Ethan's eyes darted to me, wide with panic. For the first time, he realized he wasn't the predator. He was the prey. And that's when the judge spoke the words that made my heart swell with bittersweet satisfaction. "This court will not only invalidate the forged will, but also open a criminal investigation into the parties involved." But the best part, the estate wasn't just safe, it was now legally protected under an irrevocable trust that Ethan couldn't touch. Still, the war wasn't over. Because that night, I received a call from an unknown number. When I answered, a low voice whispered, "This isn't finished. You'll pay for this." I froze, my grip on the phone tightening. The voice wasn't Ethan's, which meant someone else was helping him, and they were coming for me. The threat kept echoing in my head long after I hung up the phone. "You'll pay for this." I sat there in the dim light of my living room, the clock ticking loudly as if counting down to something. Whoever that voice belonged to, they were serious. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my armchair with my cane beside me, staring at the door, listening for any sound. Every creak in the house made my heart jump. My mind wandered back to Richard. What would he say if he were here? He always told me, "Margaret, never let fear make your decisions." By dawn, I had made mine. I wasn't going to cower. The next morning, Claire came to see me. Her expression was tense. "Mrs. Holloway, we've confirmed that the fake Bradley isn't just a fraud. He's a disbarred attorney with a record. His real name is Daniel Foster. He's been involved in several inheritance scams, but this time, he's picked the wrong victim." My stomach tightened. "So he's dangerous." "Very," she said. "And we believe he's the one who called you last night. You need to be careful." I chuckled bitterly. Careful. Claire, I'm an old woman with nothing to lose. They're the ones who should be careful. Still, I agreed to her advice and installed new security cameras around the house. I also called my neighbor, an old friend named Henry, to keep an eye out. Henry was a retired cop with a sharp mind and a loaded shotgun. For a few days, things were quiet. Ethan didn't call, and there were no strange letters. It was almost too quiet. Then, one evening as I was pouring myself tea, the power went out. The house was swallowed by darkness. I froze, listening. The wind howled outside, but through it, I heard faint footsteps, soft, deliberate, moving around the back of the house. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone, but there was no signal. The power outage had knocked out the Wi-Fi too. I grabbed my cane and slowly moved to the living room. The moonlight through the window cast long, eerie shadows. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Suddenly, a figure appeared outside, just beyond the glass, tall, wearing a hood. I gasped, stepping back. The figure tapped the window, slowly, almost mockingly. Then he spoke, his voice low and chilling. "You think you're clever, old lady? This is your last warning. Drop the case." Before I could respond, Henry's porch light came on next door. The hooded man darted away into the darkness. Henry stormed in seconds later, shotgun in hand. "Margaret, you okay?" I nodded, shaking. "They were here, Henry. They were right here." We called the police, but by the time they arrived, the man was gone. They promised to patrol the area, but I knew better. Whoever this was wouldn't stop that easily. The next day, I met with Claire again. She urged me to consider staying somewhere safer until the trial was over. But I refused. This is my house. I'm not leaving it because some coward thinks he can scare me. Instead, I turned the fear into fuel. I started writing down everything, every call, every threat, every strange thing that happened. If they wanted to play dirty, so would I. That evening, I received another call. This time, the voice wasn't masked. It was Ethan. "Mom," he said, almost pleading. "Please, drop this. You're ruining everything." "No, Ethan," I said coldly. "You ruined everything when you tried to steal from me." He went silent, then his voice hardened. "Fine. You brought this on yourself." He hung up. I sat in silence, clutching the phone. My son was gone. The boy I raised no longer existed. In his place was someone I didn't recognize. That night, as the wind howled again, I sat by the window and waited. I knew they'd try something else. They always do. And I was right. Because just after midnight, I saw headlights creeping up my driveway. But this time, I wasn't alone. Henry was waiting in the shadows, and what happened next would change everything. The beam of headlights crawled slowly across my front yard, cutting through the darkness like a predator stalking its prey. I gripped my cane tighter, my breath shallow. From my chair, I could see the vehicle. It was a black SUV, unfamiliar, its engine humming low as it came to a stop at the edge of my driveway. Henry crouched near the porch, shotgun at the ready. We had rehearsed this moment, just in case. He signaled me with a quick nod to stay inside and keep the lights off. The car door opened slowly. A figure stepped out, tall and broad, with his hood pulled over his head. Even from a distance, I knew it wasn't Ethan. This was the other man, the one who had whispered threats over the phone. Daniel Foster. He moved like a shadow, creeping toward my porch. Every instinct told me to run, but I forced myself to stay calm. If I panicked, he would win. As he climbed the steps, Henry stepped out from the darkness. "Don't move," Henry barked, pointing the shotgun straight at him. Foster froze, his hands raised slightly. But then, instead of retreating, he smirked. "You don't have the guts, old man," he said, his voice calm, almost mocking. Henry didn't flinch. Try me. That standoff felt like an eternity. Finally, Foster took a step back. This isn't over, he growled. You think you can hide behind that gun forever? When it's gone, she'll still be an easy target. Henry stepped forward, his finger tightening on the trigger. The next time you step foot here, you won't walk away. Foster glared at us, then slowly backed off, retreating to the SUV. The engine roared to life, and he sped off into the night. My knees gave out, and I sank into the nearest chair, trembling. Henry rushed to my side. You okay, Margaret? I nodded, though my heart was still racing. I'm fine. But they're getting desperate. The police came minutes later, but of course, Foster was long gone. They promised to investigate, but I knew men like him were slippery. The next morning, I decided enough was enough. I called Claire. It's time to use everything we've got, I told her. She didn't hesitate. Understood. I'll file the emergency motion today. That afternoon, we met at her office. Claire laid out all the evidence, the recordings from my hospital room, the letter Ethan had sent, the police report from the night before. This is strong, she said. When the judge sees this, they won't have a leg to stand on. But there was something else, something I hadn't told Ethan or Foster. My estate wasn't just protected, it was rigged with a condition that neither of them would ever expect. You remember the surprise you told me to hold until the right moment? Claire asked with a knowing smile. I nodded slowly. Yes, it's time. That surprise was my ace in the hole. A second will, sealed and notarized, that not only secured my assets but also detailed every act of betrayal by Ethan and Daniel. It left everything to my granddaughter Lily, who had always loved me unconditionally. The best part? Ethan thought Lily had been written out years ago. He had no idea she was about to inherit everything. As we finalized the documents, Claire looked at me seriously. Margaret, after this, things might get worse before they get better. They'll be cornered. I took a deep breath. Let them come. They think I'm weak, but they've underestimated me. That night, I returned home with a strange mix of fear and determination. I locked every door, every window. Henry promised to stay close, and I believed him. But at 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of glass shattering downstairs. My heart pounded as I grabbed my cane. The intruder had returned. I crept down the hallway, every step echoing in the silence. As I reached the top of the stairs, I saw a shadow moving in my living room. Then the lights flicked on. Henry was already there, pointing his shotgun at Foster, who was holding a crowbar. Drop it! Henry roared. Foster hesitated for only a second before lunging toward him. A shot rang out. I screamed. The sound was deafening. Foster fell to the floor, clutching his arm. The crowbar clattered to the ground. Henry called the police while I stood frozen, my whole body shaking. The sirens wailed in the distance as the man groaned on my floor, bleeding. When the officers arrived, they cuffed him and hauled him away. Before he was dragged out, he turned his head and snarled at me. This isn't the end, old lady. Ethan will finish what I started. I met his gaze, my voice cold. No, Daniel. This is the end. For both of you. But deep down, I knew he was right about one thing. Ethan wasn't done yet. And the next move he made would be his most dangerous one yet. The night Foster was dragged away by the police, I felt a strange calm settle over the house. But it didn't last long. Deep down, I knew Ethan wouldn't let this go. Men like Foster were dangerous, yes, but Ethan? He was desperate, and desperation is far worse. The following morning, I received a phone call from Claire. Her voice was steady, but I could sense an edge of concern. Mrs. Holloway, she said, we just got word, Ethan has hired a new lawyer. They're filing a motion to challenge the validity of your will, claiming you're mentally incompetent. I froze. Mentally incompetent? Yes, she continued. They're trying to argue that your illness has affected your judgment. They'll try to prove you weren't of sound mind when you signed the last documents. I laughed bitterly. They really think they can twist this around? Claire sighed. They'll stop at nothing. But don't worry, we're prepared. I've already gathered medical evaluations, video evidence, and testimonies to prove your mental capacity. Still, this means you'll have to appear in court soon. Court. At my age, just thinking about standing in front of a judge was exhausting. But I wasn't going to back down. Not now, not ever. For the next few days, I prepared myself mentally. Henry stayed close, making sure the house was secure. My granddaughter Lily came to visit, bringing me tea and cookies, her presence warming my heart. Grandma, she said softly, don't let them scare you. Dad's choices aren't your fault. Tears welled up in my eyes. Oh, Lily, you have no idea how much it means to hear that. Meanwhile, Ethan was making moves of his own. I caught glimpses of him outside the courthouse during preliminary hearings, surrounded by men in expensive suits. His face was hard, cold, unrecognizable to me. The first day of the trial arrived. I walked into the courtroom with my cane, my head held high. Ethan avoided my eyes. His new lawyer, a slick young man with a shark-like smile, looked me up and down as if sizing up an easy target. When the proceedings began, Ethan's lawyer went straight for the attack. Your Honor, this woman is clearly unfit to manage her own affairs. The medical records show she was gravely ill and under heavy medication when she signed the contested will. We have reason to believe she was manipulated. Manipulated. The irony almost made me laugh. Claire stood up confidently. Your Honor, not only was my client of sound mind when she signed the documents, but we also have video evidence proving she fully understood every decision she made. Furthermore, we have recordings that will expose the real manipulation at play here. Gasps echoed through the courtroom when the judge allowed the evidence to be played. The audio filled the room, Ethan's voice, clear as day, instructing Foster on how to trick me into signing the forged papers. Then Foster's own words, she won't know the difference. By the time anyone finds out, we'll have the money. The judge's face hardened. Ethan's lawyer tried to object, but it was too late. The damage was done. Ethan's face turned pale. He clenched his fists, his jaw tight, his eyes shooting daggers at me. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. The judge postponed the final ruling to the next session, giving both sides time to prepare for closing arguments. As I left the courtroom, Ethan brushed past me, whispering, "You think this is over? You're wrong. You have no idea what I'm capable of." I stopped and looked him dead in the eye. Neither do you, Ethan. That night, I couldn't sleep. The storm outside rattled the windows, and my thoughts were a whirlwind. Ethan was cornered, but a cornered man is the most dangerous kind. And my fear was justified. Because at dawn, I woke to the smell of smoke. Rushing to the window, I saw flames licking the edges of my garage. My heart raced as I stumbled to call 911. Henry came running over with a fire extinguisher, battling the fire until the firefighters arrived. The blaze was contained, but the message was clear. This wasn't an accident. Someone wanted me scared. Someone wanted me gone. The fire marshal confirmed it later. Arson. I stood in the ashes of what was left, clutching Lily's hand. "Grandma, this is getting dangerous," she said, tears in her eyes. I looked at her, my voice steady. "I'm not backing down. Not now, not ever. They want to burn me out? Fine. Let them try. I've been through worse fires than this." Little did I know, Ethan's next move would be even more ruthless. Because the next day, Claire received a shocking piece of evidence, a bank statement showing that Ethan had drained every joint account we once shared, leaving a trail that linked him to Foster even after his arrest. And with that evidence came something even more alarming, a subpoena summoning Ethan to testify under oath. This was it. The storm was about to hit full force. The morning of Ethan's subpoena hearing was eerily quiet, as if the world was holding its breath. I sat in Claire's office, sipping tea with trembling hands while she reviewed the latest documents. "Mrs. Holloway," she said, glancing up from the papers, "this is going to be intense. Ethan will be forced to testify under oath, and we have enough evidence to corner him. But I have to warn you, people like him often lash out when they're exposed." I nodded, my voice firm despite my shaking. "Let him lash out. I'm ready." When we arrived at the courthouse, I saw Ethan waiting with his lawyer. He looked different, disheveled, desperate. His expensive suit couldn't hide the fear in his eyes. For a brief moment, I saw the little boy I once rocked to sleep, and my heart ached. But then he smirked at me, and that ache hardened into resolve. The hearing began. Claire laid out the evidence methodically: the forged will, the recordings, the arson report, the bank statements linking Ethan to Foster. With every piece presented, I saw Ethan's confidence crack. Then it was his turn to take the stand. His lawyer tried to paint him as a loving son worried about his mother's declining health. Ethan was only acting in her best interest, the lawyer claimed. But under Claire's questioning, Ethan faltered. "Mr. Holloway," she said coolly, "can you explain why you instructed Daniel Foster to manipulate your mother's signature?" I didn't," he stammered. "Then why do we have a recording of your voice giving those exact instructions?" Claire asked, playing the audio for the court again. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Ethan's face turned red. That's taken out of context." "Context?" Claire pressed. "Is arson also out of context? Because the fire marshal's report suggests the blaze at your mother's house was no accident, and your fingerprints were found on a gas can recovered near the scene." Ethan's eyes widened. He shot a panicked look at his lawyer, who seemed to shrink under the weight of the evidence. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Holloway, this is your chance to tell the truth." For a moment, Ethan looked like he might break. His lips trembled. But then he composed himself, his voice cold. "You're all lying. This is a setup. My mother is manipulating you all to cut me out of what's rightfully mine." A gasp rippled through the room. The judge banged his gavel. I sat still, my hands folded, my eyes fixed on my son. My heart broke all over again, not because of his words, but because I realized there was no saving the person he had become. The judge announced a recess, giving everyone time to collect themselves. As we stepped into the hallway, Ethan brushed past me, whispering through clenched teeth, "This isn't over. You think you've won, but you'll regret this, Mom." Before I could respond, he stormed off, his lawyer chasing after him. That night, the threats started again. This time, they weren't whispered, they were bold. An envelope slipped under my door contained a single message: "If I can't have it, no one will." The next day, Claire arrived with urgent news. "Mrs. Holloway, we've intercepted information that Ethan withdrew a large sum of cash and purchased an unregistered firearm. We need to get you somewhere safe immediately." My stomach dropped. "A gun?" "Yes," she said gravely. "We believe he's planning something drastic. The police are aware, but we can't take chances." Reluctantly, I agreed to leave my home temporarily. Henry insisted on driving me to a secure location arranged by Claire. As we pulled away from my house, I looked back at it, tears filling my eyes. It was just bricks and wood, but it held my entire life. For 2 nights, I stayed hidden in a small cabin far from town. The silence was unnerving, but at least I felt safe, or so I thought. On the 3rd night, I heard footsteps crunching outside the cabin. My breath caught. Henry grabbed his shotgun, peering through the window. Under the pale moonlight, a figure emerged from the trees. It was Ethan. He was holding something metallic that glinted in the moonlight. Henry shouted, "Stop right there, Ethan. Don't make me do this." But Ethan didn't stop. His voice cracked as he yelled, "She's ruined everything. I have nothing left." He raised the gun. I stepped outside despite Henry's protests, my heart pounding. "Ethan, put it down," I said, my voice trembling but strong. "You're my son. Don't do this." For a moment, his hand wavered. His face twisted with pain, confusion, rage. "You should have just given me what I deserved." Tears streamed down my face. "You don't deserve it, Ethan. You lost it the moment you chose greed over love." The tension hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Then a shot rang out. The world blurred as everything happened at once. Henry tackled me to the ground. Officers who had been trailing Ethan rushed in, tackling him, forcing the gun from his hands. Ethan screamed, thrashing as they cuffed him. "This isn't over. You'll see. I'll get out. You'll pay." The officers dragged him away, his voice fading into the night. I sat on the cold ground, shaking, my heart breaking and healing all at once. The judge would make his ruling soon, but Ethan's actions had already sealed his fate. Still, I knew this wasn't the end. Because the real surprise, the one I had saved for the final court session, had yet to be revealed. And when it was, it would burn every last piece of their greedy plans to ashes. The day of the final court session dawned gray and cold, with a mist that clung to the courthouse steps. I walked slowly, my cane tapping the stone with each step, Claire by my side. My heart was heavy, yet I felt a strange sense of power. This was it, the day everything would come to light. Inside the courtroom, the air was thick with tension. Ethan sat at the defendant's table, his hands cuffed, his face pale but his eyes burning with hatred. His new lawyer looked defeated, shuffling papers that wouldn't save them now. Across the aisle, Claire stood tall, exuding confidence. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. "Today," he said sternly, "we will hear the final arguments and present the remaining evidence before a ruling is made." Claire began with calm authority. She presented the recordings, the arson evidence, the threats, and finally, Ethan's attempted attack at the cabin. The jury listened in stunned silence as each piece fell perfectly into place, painting a picture of a man consumed by greed and willing to destroy his own mother to get what he wanted. Ethan's lawyer tried to argue, but it was pointless. The facts were undeniable. Still, Ethan glared at me with a twisted smile, as if daring me to make the final move. When it was my turn to speak, I rose slowly, leaning on my cane. The courtroom watched as I approached the stand. My voice was soft but steady. "I am Margaret Holloway," I began, "an 85-year-old woman who has spent her life loving her family and working hard for what I have. My husband and I built everything from nothing. I raised my son with love, with every intention of giving him a future better than mine. But somewhere along the way, he lost himself to greed. He chose to betray me, to hurt me, to try to take everything I hold dear." My voice cracked, but I pressed on. "He thought my age made me weak. He thought my illness made me easy to manipulate. But he forgot one thing. Experience teaches you to be strong, to prepare for storms long before they come." The courtroom was silent, all eyes on me. "And that," I said, turning to Ethan, "is why I left you a surprise you'll never forget." A murmur ran through the room. Ethan stiffened, his smile faltering. Claire stepped forward, holding a sealed envelope. "Your Honor, this is a secondary will and testament executed years before any of this began, with a hidden clause triggered by any attempt of fraud or harm toward Mrs. Holloway. It not only disinherits Ethan completely, but transfers the entire estate into a charitable foundation and a trust fund for her granddaughter, Lily. The accused stands to inherit nothing." Gasps filled the room. Ethan shot to his feet. "No! You can't do this! You're lying. The judge banged his gavel. Order. Claire continued calmly. Furthermore, the foundation is set to use a portion of the estate to support elderly victims of financial abuse. Mrs. Holloway's wealth will not be used to reward greed, but to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Ethan's face contorted with rage. He screamed, "You'll regret this, Mom. I swear." The bailiff restrained him as he thrashed wildly, shouting curses. The judge's voice cut through the chaos. "Mr. Holloway, enough. The evidence against you is overwhelming. The court finds you guilty of fraud, attempted arson, and attempted harm. You are hereby sentenced to a maximum security facility pending appeal." The gavel came down with a loud crack. Ethan was dragged away, screaming my name. I sat back in my seat, tears streaming down my face. I didn't cry for the victory. I cried for the son I had lost long ago, the boy who never came back. After the ruling, Lily hugged me tightly. "Grandma, you did it," she whispered. "No, sweetheart," I said softly, wiping my tears. "We did it. Love did it. The truth did it." Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, asking for comments. I simply said, "This wasn't about money. This was about standing up to betrayal, no matter how close to home it comes." As the cameras flashed, I looked up at the gray sky and whispered, "Richard, we did it." But just as I thought it was over, an officer approached Claire and handed her an envelope. She opened it, her face paling as she read. She looked at me, her voice trembling. "Mrs. Holloway, you need to see this." Inside was a note in Ethan's handwriting, sent from the prison. It read, "You may have won today, but this isn't the end. The foundation you love so much, I know things about it you don't. And when the truth comes out, everything you've built will crumble. Watch your back, Mom." My heart skipped a beat. Even from behind bars, he was plotting. And I knew, deep down, that my battle was not yet over. Because someone on the outside was helping him. The prison letter gnawed at my mind like a persistent shadow. Ethan was behind bars, yet his words carried a venom that spread through every corner of my thoughts. Someone is helping him. That line stuck with me the most. Who could it be? Claire tried to reassure me. "Mrs. Holloway, he's bluffing. Inmates say things like this to intimidate their victims." But I knew Ethan better. He wasn't bluffing. He never threatened without a plan. That night, I sat alone in my living room, staring at the fire crackling in the hearth. My house felt too quiet. Henry had gone home, and Lily was back at her college dorm. Every creak in the floorboards made me tense. Then I noticed something out of place. A file had been slid under my door. I picked it up cautiously, my hands trembling. Inside were photocopies of documents, bank transfers, charity transactions, and a single sticky note with 2 words scrawled across it, "Ask Claire." My heart pounded. Claire, my trusted lawyer? Could she be involved? The next morning, I confronted her. She was calm, almost too calm. "Margaret, where did you get these?" she asked, scanning the papers. "They were left at my door last night," I said, my voice tight. "Is there something you haven't told me?" Claire sighed, setting the papers down. "These transfers, they're legitimate. I handled them myself. But the note, this is meant to turn you against me. Someone's trying to plant doubt." Her explanation made sense, but the unease in my chest didn't fade. Before I could press further, my phone rang. It was Henry. "Margaret," he said urgently, "I saw a man lurking around your house again last night. Not Foster. Someone else. I couldn't catch him, but I swear he was watching your windows." The realization hit me like a cold wave. Ethan wasn't working alone. Someone on the outside was still feeding him information, helping him manipulate the situation even from prison. That evening, Claire suggested I move to a secure hotel while she worked to trace the bank activity. I reluctantly agreed. I packed my things, but as I zipped my bag, I noticed a small flash drive taped under my dresser. It wasn't mine. I plugged it into my laptop. What I saw made my stomach drop. Dozens of emails popped up, messages between Ethan and an unknown contact using the alias Sparrow. The emails detailed plans to undermine the charity foundation, leak fabricated scandals to the press, and even forge new documents to contest the court's ruling. The last email was dated yesterday. It read, "Everything is ready. Once the charity is discredited, the court will have no choice but to reopen the case. Funds will be diverted without her even noticing. Execute Phase 2. My hands shook. I called Claire immediately and forwarded the files. "They're planning something big," I said, my voice breaking. Claire called back minutes later, her tone urgent. "Margaret, whoever Sparrow is, they have access to sensitive financial records. This isn't just about Ethan anymore. This is organized. We need to move fast." The next morning, the foundation made headlines. False reports surfaced online, accusing it of misusing donations. News stations picked it up instantly. My phone wouldn't stop ringing, reporters, donors, even old friends asking if it was true. Ethan's warning was coming true. His network was already dismantling everything I had built. In a panic, I rushed to the foundation's headquarters. The staff was in chaos. Computers were being seized by investigators responding to anonymous tips. Documents were scattered everywhere. I pulled the director aside. "Who had access to our accounts?" He hesitated. "Only me and your lawyer, Mrs. Preston." Claire. Again, her name was tangled in this mess. My head spun. Could Sparrow be someone working under her? Or was she really hiding something? That night, back at the hotel, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. Then, around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. "If you want the truth about Sparrow, meet me at the old Holloway Publishing Building at dawn. Come alone." My gut told me it was a trap. But my heart told me it was my only chance to stop this madness. At sunrise, I drove to the abandoned building. The air was thick with fog, the kind that clings to your skin. Inside, it was cold and silent, dust swirling in the shafts of light from broken windows. I called out, "Who's there?" A figure stepped out from the shadows. It wasn't Claire. It wasn't Ethan. It was someone I hadn't seen in decades, my late husband's former business partner, Gerald Price. "Gerald!" I gasped. He smirked. "Surprised, Margaret? You should be. I'm Sparrow." My heart stopped. He stepped closer, his eyes gleaming with malice. "Ethan may have failed, but I won't. I've been waiting years to take back what Richard stole from me. And thanks to your son's stupidity, you've handed me everything I need." My knees trembled. "You're behind all this?" "Oh yes," he said, pulling out a folder. "By the time I'm done, the courts will believe you orchestrated the fraud. Your charity will be destroyed, and your name will be ruined. Ethan will rot in prison, and you'll die forgotten." Before I could react, he lunged at me. I stumbled back, but my cane struck his arm, sending the folder scattering to the ground. Papers flew everywhere. Then, out of nowhere, Henry burst in, shotgun raised. "Step away from her, Gerald." Gerald froze, his hands up. Moments later, the police arrived. Henry had tipped them off when I didn't answer his calls. Gerald was arrested on the spot. As they dragged him away, he spat at me. "This isn't over, Margaret. You may have won today, but the fire is still burning." My hands shook as I picked up one of the scattered papers. It was a bank statement, showing massive unauthorized withdrawals from the charity's funds. Gerald wasn't lying. The damage was already done. And when I returned to my hotel that night, another letter was waiting for me, slipped under my door. It was from Ethan. You stopped him, but you didn't stop me. Mom, the real fire is coming. Be ready. My breath caught. If Gerald was the mastermind, Ethan was still the spark. The sun rose on what I knew would be the longest day of my life. I sat by the hotel window, watching the city come alive, while my heart pounded with dread. Gerald Price was in custody, but Ethan's final threat echoed in my mind. The real fire is coming. Be ready. I didn't know how he could possibly strike again from prison, but deep down, I believed him. Ethan was his father's son, resourceful, cunning. Only he had twisted those qualities into something dark. Claire arrived early, her face drawn with worry. Margaret, the financial scandal has escalated. Despite Gerald's arrest, the media is still tearing the foundation apart. Donations have frozen, and there's pressure on the court to reopen your case. My chest tightened. Then we need to show them the truth, everything. She nodded. I've compiled every piece of evidence against Gerald and Ethan, including the emails from the Sparrow account. We'll present it today. This will be the last hearing. After this, the judge will make a final decision. The ride to the courthouse felt endless. I stared out the window, memories of Richard flooding back. Our early days building the publishing company, the nights we stayed up planning our future, the promises we made to protect each other's legacy. When we arrived, reporters swarmed the steps, shouting questions. I said nothing. My strength was for inside those walls. The courtroom was packed. Ethan sat at the defendant's table, no longer in a suit but in an orange jumpsuit, shackled at the wrists. Yet his expression was smug, almost triumphant. He leaned toward me as I passed and whispered, "You can't stop what's already in motion." I didn't respond. I took my seat beside Claire, clutching Lily's hand for strength. The judge entered. This court is now in session for the final hearing in the matter of Margaret Holloway versus Ethan Holloway. Claire opened with a powerful statement. Your Honor, this is not just a case about inheritance. It is a case about betrayal, manipulation, and the strength of a woman who refused to be silenced by greed. We will show how both Ethan Holloway and Gerald Price conspired to destroy not only my client's life but her legacy. She presented everything: the recordings, the emails, the arson evidence, Gerald's confession documents, and the traced financial transfers proving he and Ethan coordinated the attacks on the charity. The courtroom gasped when video footage was shown of Gerald meeting with an unidentified man near the prison fence days before his arrest, passing Ethan a burner phone wrapped in plastic. Ethan's lawyer stood to object, but the judge silenced him. Sit down. The evidence is clear. Then the surprise Claire had been holding back came to light. Your Honor, she said, we also present a sworn statement from an anonymous whistleblower inside the prison. They confirm Ethan ordered multiple attacks, coordinated scams, and paid Gerald to destroy the foundation. The payments were traced back to a hidden account under Ethan's name. Ethan's face drained of color. Lies, he shouted, but the judge banged the gavel. Finally, I stood. My voice trembled at first, then grew strong. Your Honor, I am not here for vengeance. I am here to protect what my husband and I built. My son has chosen to betray me, to harm me, to destroy everything we stood for. I've cried for him, I've begged for him, but now? I must let him face the consequences of his choices. The judge's eyes softened, then turned stern. The court finds Ethan Holloway guilty on all charges, including fraud, conspiracy, and attempted harm. He is hereby sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. The gavel struck. The room erupted with murmurs. Ethan screamed, lunging toward me as the bailiffs restrained him. You think you've won, old woman? You think this is the end? I looked at him calmly, tears streaming down my cheeks. No, Ethan. This is the beginning of a life where you can't hurt anyone else. As he was dragged out, I felt the weight of years lift from my shoulders. The foundation was cleared of wrongdoing within hours, donations surged again, and the press hailed me as a symbol of resilience. Lily inherited the trust as planned, and together we began rebuilding, stronger than before. Weeks later, I stood at Richard's grave, holding the court's final decree in my hand. "We did it, my love," I whispered. "They tried to burn us down, but we rose from the ashes." When I turned to leave, I noticed an envelope on the headstone, sealed with a smudge of prison ink. My heart pounded as I opened it. Inside was a single line, written in Ethan's hand. "You may have one, but as long as I breathe, the fire never dies." I shivered, but instead of fear, I felt something else. Pity. Ethan had become a prisoner long before the bars closed around him. I walked away with my head high. My legacy was safe, my granddaughter protected, and my husband's memory honored. For the first time in years, I felt free.